Hi there, it's Alexandra from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and I've got some easy, effective water saving tips for the garden. I've been talking to a charity called Hubbub who've been doing a campaign called #TapChat about saving water both in the house and the garden and in life generally. And they told me that the southeast of England, where I live, has much the same rainfall as Melbourne, which is actually somewhere I go for about 3 weeks a year. And I do notice when I'm in Melbourne that they are much, much more aware of how important it is to save water in the garden. So I've got some easy, effective tips here, and it is important that they're easy, because if something saves you time or saves you money, you're more likely to go on doing it, and then it becomes a changed habit. And it's only through changed habits that will really significantly alter how much water we use. So let's start with water butts. Now, everyone always says, oh, save water, get a water butt, but it is just a little bit more complicated than that, because a very small water butt will only really water your garden for sort of 3 or 4 days if there is a drought. And of course, if it doesn't rain again for 5 or 6 weeks, it's empty. So the first thing I would say about water butts is get as big a water butt as you can, or several water butts. I have 2 quite big water butts beside my sheds, and I can water the garden from those for about 10 days at a time. So that is much more useful than the small water butt which we have on the terrace. So when it comes to watering, firstly, I think it's quite good to have a hose that has a nozzle you can close off between tasks, because otherwise you can leave it, and indeed it's very easy to just leave a hose running in a border and to forget that it's there. So having a hose you can turn off with a nozzle is a very great help. Next, what to water. If you have an established lawn, there's absolutely no need to water it, because it'll bounce back. It'll go brown, but it'll bounce back. If your lawn is new this year, you do have to water it every day, even if it's raining, sadly. Apart from that, newly planted shrubs and trees also need watering, as do bedding plants and vegetables. But established shrubs really should be able to manage, and if they really can't manage in your climate, it probably means you ought to get a more drought-resistant plant. Water in the evenings or the mornings so that the water doesn't get evaporated by the sun, and also water right around the roots of the plant rather than using a sprinkler. And then one of the best things you can do is to pile mulch onto your border, because that will stop the water from evaporating. People use compost, or they can use lawn clippings, or they use bark chips, or they can use wood chips. It's really up to you. It'll all eventually decompose into your garden soil, and it will feed your plants. So it's a win-win all round. Pots. Now, plants in pots do dry out much more quickly than plants in the ground, and plants in small pots dry out much more quickly than plants in large pots. It's a great help to use a water-saving gel, but if you have small pots, you will be watering them every day. You can stop the evaporation from them a bit by clustering them all together. And I found that helps, and it also makes it easier to water them. If you do want to have individual pots around, it really does make a big difference to choose a drought-resistant plant like pelargoniums. If you're having any major work done in the garden, you can build in an irrigation system, and actually this can be hugely helpful because you can time it to go on and off at certain times and make sure that you only use the amount of water you really need. However, I think you do need a properly plumbed-in irrigation system. We tried out one a few years ago, which was attached to our garden tap, and it was quite easy to install, but we never really felt we could use it properly because I was very worried about leaving the tap on and having the irrigation system perhaps going for 2 or 3 days, and as we're metered, that would have been very expensive. And the other thing is, of course, is that if you're using your garden tap for other things, then having to plug the irrigation system onto that is really not convenient. And now let's see what Stephen Ryan, TV and radio horticulturalist from Melbourne, has to say. He has some great water saving strategies in his garden, and his garden is absolutely fantastically sustainable, as well as being full of luscious plants.
With water that comes from the houses, because we've actually got 2 houses on the block, which makes it a little complicated, but one house is attached to 2 large tanks, so the water goes straight into the tanks. When the tanks are full, the overflow from the tanks go into my top pond here, so it actually just feeds the ponds. The other pond, which is in the front garden, is fed by the other house. So the stormwater from the other house goes down through the bottom pond. So, and when either of the ponds overflow, it flows back into the garden. So it keeps the water levels up in the garden during the winter, and none of our stormwater even gets to the street.
Reusing household water is another thing you'll be advised to do. My sister-in-law in Melbourne, for example, pours water from the condenser dryer into a watering can in order to water plants instead of throwing it down the sink. Other grey water options include using the washing up water from a bowl and throwing the water out onto the ground, but water containing strong detergents isn't advised, so unless you use eco detergents, that may not be the best thing to do. There are more resources in the description below, and do press like if you've enjoyed this, because then I know you'd like to hear more about the environmental side of gardening. And if you haven't subscribed to the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel, we upload on Saturdays with tips, ideas and inspiration so that you can make your garden more beautiful and easier to garden. Thank you for watching. Bye.